Every Quirk in My Hero Academia Part 1. A quirk, formerly known as a meta ability, is a superhuman ability that a person can possess. Along with being unique to each user, quirks are sorted into multiple categories. Quirk users are also limited to one ability and are thus unable to achieve any other. About 80% of the population can utilize a quirk. A quirk is innate to the quirk holder's body. It can also be referred to as an individuality. In some exceptionally rare cases, animals can also develop quirks. Welcome to the Amagi. In today's video, we're going over every quirk in My Hero Academia Part 1. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Acid. Acid is the quirk used by Mina Ashido. Acid allows Mina to create corrosive liquid from her skin being naturally resistant to the acid she produces. This quirk alters Mina's skin pigment, resulting in it having a purple-pink coloration, but in spite of that, her acid itself seems to be gray. Acid can be generated in high quantities from any part of her skin, with Mina being capable of manipulating it to an extent. Mina can control the levels of solubility and viscosity of her acid. By lowering solubility, she ensures that her quirk doesn't become lethal against most living beings. Mina is noted to be capable of burning entrance holes on surfaces, letting her infiltrate secure locations. Similarly, she is able to melt spots on a wall with her acid-generating limbs in order to facilitate climbing. For ground mobility, Mina is capable of making the floor wet and slippery with acid for her to skate on. As part of her training, Mina constantly produced acid in order to increase her skin's durability, namely towards the corrosive properties of her quirk. Acid Sweat. Acid Sweat is the quirk of Masaru Bakugo. Acid Sweat allows Masaru to generate an acidic sweat with combustive and explosive properties from his palms. If he rubs his hands together, he can create explosions, but unlike his son's quirk, he cannot forcibly secrete it, and it comes out like normal sweat. This, along with his wife's quirk, is why Katsuki has to secrete sweat in his explosion quirk as they become more powerful. Air Cannon. Air Cannon is a quirk possessed by All For One, who stole it from an unknown person and is later used by Tomura Shigaraki. Air Cannon allows All For One to release an air shockwave from his arms. The shockwave can manifest in different forms depending on the motion All For One's arms follow when releasing it. The blast's shape can range from a straight concentrated air shot to a wide crescent-shaped air blade. All For One utilizes Air Cannon as one of his primary means of attack. Sometimes he uses this quirk for defense as well, blowing away projectiles sent his way. The first time this technique was used, it was able to defeat several pro heroes at once. Even with Air Cannon's enhancements, however, All Might is able to block the shockwave to an extent, thanks to the strength granted by his own quirk. After receiving All For One's quirk, Tomura Shigaraki uses Air Cannon in his fight with the pro hero Endeavor. He also uses this quirk in conjunction with radio waves to create a wide-range blast which can shut down communications used by heroes. Airwalk. Airwalk is a stolen quirk possessed by All For One and later transferred to Lady Nagant. Airwalk allows the user the ability to stand on and control the air around them, granting them levitation. Airwalk facilitates mobility, allowing the user better offensive and evasive abilities due to not being confined to the ground. The quirk can be utilized to either float straight upwards, as well as be able to walk and skip across invisible air platforms while in midair. If the user is not focused, the air beneath the user's feet will give in, resulting in them starting to fall. All For One. All For One is the quirk used by a mysterious villain who names himself after it before being transferred to the man's successor, Tomura Shigaraki. All For One allows the user to steal the quirks of other people and wield those stolen powers as their own. It also allows the user to redistribute stolen quirks to someone else. The process of giving and taking away quirks is done through touch. A victim whose quirk has been stolen becomes quirkless and loses any abnormal features if the powers happen to be mutant types. Rarely, a quirk granted by this ability can blend together with the recipient's original quirk, creating an entirely new power, as shown with One For All. All For One can be used to combine several quirks in order to create devastating techniques, which would normally not be possible with the usage of only one quirk. All for One's first user intended to have Tamura inherit his quirks, implying that transferring All for One itself to another person is possible. All for One seems to grant access to an unidentified mental realm contained within the quirk, similar to its counterpart quirk, One for All, as shown when Tamura tried to steal One for All from Izuku. When this happened, the mental realms of both quirks became connected temporarily, and the current users and the stored consciousness of previous users were shown inhabiting the same mental realm. There are some limitations to the quirk. Not all recipients of a quirk from All for One are able to handle the strain of gaining them. Subsequently, they may become mindless dolls, who are not able to speak or think for themselves. All for One is incapable of stealing One for All from its wielder, as that quirk, by its very nature, can only be passed on if the present wielder wills it. Thus, wielders of One for All can act as a natural counter of sorts against All for One's ability to steal other quirks. However, he was able to overcome this limitation in the past against previous wielders of One for All due to the sheer number of quirks he possessed. Furthermore, Kyudai performed various experiments on the body of Tamura so the latter can be capable of stealing One for All, a feat All for One himself couldn't accomplish. It was eventually revealed that One for All's anti-theft properties can be overridden by someone with strong negative emotions, due to it eating away at a potential inheritor's will. This also means that the Elder Shigaraki didn't have enough hatred to steal One for All on his own. After his fight with All Might, All for One's permanent life-threatening injuries drastically reduced his power and output, with his quirk forcing All for One to come up with a way to either heal himself or strengthen and take a new body to recover and surpass his previous limits. While not an issue for the original wielder of the quirk, one particular weakness of All for One is that an inheritor of the original quirk variant is the threat of the previous wielder's will taking over the body and controlling the current user, as is the case for Tamura being taken over by All for One. As described by the vestigial will of All for One contained within the quirk, negative emotions such as hatred and anger would allow his consciousness to take over the body of its current wielder. Amplivolt. Amplivolt is the quirk used by one of the commanders of the Paranormal Liberation Front. Amplivolt allows the user to conduct and amplify electricity within their body, being able to release it afterwards. Once amplified enough, the user is able to fire blasts of stored electricity from their hands. They're also resistant to the harmful effects of electricity, as the user is shown electrifying himself with a taser without any signs of harm towards himself. The user of Amplivolt is shown activating his quirk to attack the army of heroes raiding the Gunga Mountain Villa, intending to stop the raiders in their tracks with his strongest super move, Supreme Discharge Thundernet. However, Denki Kaminari was able to absorb the entire attack using electrification, letting his comrades continue the raid. The user carries a taser which he uses to transfer electricity into his own system, acting as a source of electricity that he can amplify. Unlike electrification, Amplivolt does not appear to be capable of generating electricity by itself, requiring contact with an outside source of energy for the user to charge up. The electric current generated from this quirk can be absorbed by objects or quirks that can draw or conduct electricity to negate it, such as electrification. Anavoice. Anavoice is the quirk used by Koji Koda. Anavoice allows Koji to communicate with and command animals through speech. Koji seems to be able to understand animal language or otherwise receive information from the animals he commands. This makes Koji a versatile hero due to the diversity of abilities found within the animal kingdom. For example, bugs with their small size and burrowing capabilities are able to perform sneak attacks from underground. Birds are useful for reconnaissance due to being flying creatures with great eyesight, and so on. As part of his training, Koji engaged in vocal exercise to increase the range of his Anavoice, allowing him to control animals from long distances. In the manga, Anavoice is portrayed through a unique speech bubble with undulated borders. Koji is always polite with animals when requesting their assistance, with all his pleas having been met so far. Koji appears to have a great relationship with them, which might be a possible effect of his quirk as well. Sometime before the provisional hero license exam, Koji improved his hero costume with a voice-amplifying device, which he wears over his jaw. With this piece of equipment, the sound range of Anavoice greatly expands, allowing Koji to lead a large number of animals at once. Koji is afraid of insects and other bugs, which somewhat hinders his communication with them. Despite that, Anavoice works with those animals just as well as any other. Animals must be within Koji's vocal range in order to be influenced by Anavoice. Humans, despite being animals as well, are exempt from the effects of this. This quirk also is ineffective against artificial creatures that have been shaped to resemble real animals. Anavoice is sound-based, and because of that, any noises louder than it, such as other sound-type quirks like voice, are likely to disrupt its effects, either drowning out Koji's own voice or scaring away nearby animals. In addition, this quirk is ineffective if Koji is unable to speak. Anthropomorph. Anthropomorph is the meta ability used by Tomoyasu Chikazoku. Anthropomorph allows the user to take a human-sized object, a refrigerator, a desk, etc., and turn it into an exact look-alike of any given person. The user can freely create and remotely control several of these puppet lookalikes at the same time. They are capable of being created using a liquid substance that appears from the user's hand, as seen when Skeptic touched a motorcycle and turned it into one of his puppets. When created, the puppets are all shown dressed in suited attire, hinting that Skeptic can alter their clothing as well. Puppets are designated by letters of the alphabet. Tomoyasu uses earpieces for Detnerat to remotely control several puppets at a time. He designates them by letters of the alphabet and gives them orders from a remote area away from the fighting. The puppets are effective for overwhelming targets with superior numbers. Skeptic's puppets normally look similar to gorillas, but he has changed their appearance to make replicas of Twice to exploit his trauma. Arbor. Arbor is the quirk used by Kamui Woods. Arbor allows Kamui Woods to generate and control wood from any part of his body. Through armor, he's able to manifest tendrils of wood that seemingly sprout from his skin and then extend them over a long distance. These tendrils can come from anywhere on his body, and he has full control over their actions, giving him a way to perform multiple tasks at once. Kamui Woods mostly uses his quirk for restraining enemies or to rescue people from dangerous situations. In both cases, this involves him wrapping his wooden tendrils around their bodies. Against villains, this quirk is used to bind them in place, preventing them from acting, while for rescue victims, it's a useful method for carrying them to safety, especially if there are multiple casualties. He frequently employs Arbor for evasion and locomotion, using his elongated tendrils to hold onto tall structures like buildings, which allow him to swing himself through the air. Since Arbor is a wood-based quirk, it's ineffective against flame or explosion-based attacks due to wood being combustible. Assault Dust. Assault Dust is the quirk used by an unnamed student from Masagaki Primary School. The user seems to be able to generate and manipulate dust, shooting it out at high speeds. Attraction of Small Objects. Attraction of Small Objects is the unnamed quirk possessed by Inko Midoriya. This quirk grants Inko the ability to use a telekinesis-like power to attract small objects to her. The exact size limit of what she can attract is unknown, but she is able to pull an action figure towards her from the ground or anywhere, albeit with multiple hand movements, hinting at a gravity aspect of her quirk rather than instant telekinesis. Barrier. Barrier is the quirk possessed by Hekeji Tengai. Barrier allows him to create a telekinetic barrier around him in the shape of a dome. Fat Gum equates punching Hekeji's barriers to punching a steel wall. This quirk can also be projected around the radius of Hekeji's choosing, as he's able to cover both himself and Kendo Rappa at one point, and only himself at another, indicating he has a degree of control over the size of the barriers he creates. It's unknown if the size of the barrier affects the durability of the quirk. Hekeji can also raise the barrier quickly, being able to even outspeed Kendo's strong arm. Barrier is exclusively used for defense, meaning it cannot be applied offensively. Hekeji is always at the center of the quirk, meaning that he cannot project barriers around anything that is not within his range. Despite being very sturdy, the barriers can be broken if an extreme amount of power is used against them. If Hekeji becomes too weakened or injured, he becomes unable to summon more barriers. Bat. Bat is the quirk that is used by Bato Yobayakawa. Bat quirk gives the user bat features like wings on his arms, fangs, pointed ears, etc. This quirk allows its user to run at high speeds as well as the ability to fly. However, this is only seen when Bato was under the effect of Trigger, so the capabilities of the quirk under normal circumstances are unknown. After the villain factory turned him into a next level villain by modifying his body and enhancing his quirk with more trigger, his whole body became more bat-like, in addition to improving his physical abilities. His sense of smell improves and can detect a person's trail over long distances. His flight capacity also improves exponentially, being able to fly at great speeds. Bato also acquires more strength, being able to capture a person with his claws and take him flying. Beams from his eyes. Beams from his eyes is the quirk used by Ichimoku Samazu. Beams from his eyes allows Ichimoku to fire a concentrated laser beam from his eyes. In order to fire it, he has to flip a switch on his visor, which will fire a blast at any target he's looking at. He's also able to fire off larger blasts with enough concentration. It's unknown if he requires his visor to prevent his quirk from continuously firing, or if this quirk is capable of being deactivated. Beast. Beast is the quirk used by Jurota Shishida. Beast allows Jurota to transform into a large, monstrous beast. He grows in size, with his furry, animalistic body becoming even more like that of a wild creature's, sporting huge fangs and being covered entirely in thick fur. He grows significantly stronger and faster as a result, being able to send enemies flying into the distance with a swipe of his claws, while carrying another person on his back. In this form, even jolts of electricity barely faze him, while in beast form, Jurota's senses are greatly enhanced. In particular, his sense of smell gains impressive range and precision, becoming useful for scouting enemies and their movements from afar. With Beast, Jurota is a powerful fighter who's difficult to take down in a straight battle due to the massive boost of strength and speed granted by his quirk. As a beast, Jurota runs on all fours and attacks his opponents by mauling them. He becomes a larger target as well, but is able to counter this by momentarily transforming back into his comparatively smaller human form to evade attacks. Jurota retains some of his high intelligence too, despite the rise of euphoria that comes from the transformation, meaning that he's still capable of strategizing during fights. Jurota becomes wildly enthusiastic when transformed, which can lead to reckless decisions from his part. It's impossible to trick his improved sense of smell by masking one's natural odor with something else. Big Fist. Big Fist is the quirk used by Itsuka Kendo. Big Fist allows Itsuka to enlarge one or both of her hands to enormous sizes. Itsuka's hands become gigantic, around 3 times bigger than her own body almost immediately. Her physical strength also increases in tandem. Itsuka herself does not seem affected by the increased weight of her gigantified hands. Big Fist is used for close-range combat, as Itsuka has enough power to break through most defenses. The sudden expansion of her hands can be used to surprise foes, assuming they're unaware of how her quirk functions, or increase the power of her hands through the momentum of the expansion. The enlarged hands are not only useful for combat, but can also be used as a method for transporting others and restraining opponents as well, making it very convenient for rescues and criminal escorting. Someone wrapped by Itsuka's giant hands will become protected from certain hazards, such as poisonous gas, albeit just temporarily. By flapping her enlarged fists around, Itsuka is capable of generating wind, letting her counter gas traps. Big Horn. Big Horn is the quirk that is possessed by Daikaku Miyagi. Big Horn grants Daikaku a pair of horns resembling those of a bull. Daikaku cut off one of his horns in order to relay the news with more ease, a decision which was considered controversial by his viewers. Binging Ball. Binging Ball is the quirk used by Tamashiro from Masagaki Primary School. Binging Ball allows the user to release small floating spheres with mouths from their body. These spheres can be used as projectiles, moving at very high speeds. The spheres are also capable of ingesting materials such as ice shards. Black. Black is the quirk used by Shihai Kurohiro. Black allows the user to merge their body into anything that is dark colored, whether naturally dark or dark via external circumstances, such as shadows. They can also move themselves through the darkness freely. This ability does not take mass into account, so merging with small or thin dark objects, such as a mushroom or a cape, is entirely possible. Objects that are naturally mobile can be forced to move if the user assimilates into them. Because of this, Black holds an advantage against Dark Shadow, a dark-colored living appendage, which he is capable of possessing and then controlling its actions, regardless of Fumikage Tokoyami's wishes. This quirk is most efficient in cramped areas with little to no lighting, where shadows are abundant and the lack of space physically hinders the user's opponents, preventing them from fighting properly or escaping. In combat, Shihai uses Black to hide from enemy attacks or execute ambushes. Once merged with a black object, Shihai can move through its whole structure at very high speeds, even when carrying a person. Brightening up a shadowed location will quickly cause the user to be forcibly ejected from any no longer dark object when the shadow shrouding it vanishes. As such, it has a weakness to light-based quirks. It also appears that the user can keep the ability on hold while looking for something dark to merge with, which an enemy may exploit in their favor by forcing the user's body into a dark object that they're able to grasp, which prevents the user from leaving on their own. Black Hole. Black Hole is the quirk used by 13. Black Hole allows 13 to create small black holes through her fingers. The black holes suck in and disintegrate any matter at the atomic level, as well as certain forms of energy such as light. In combat, 13 can use this ability to prevent enemies from escaping her range by sucking them towards herself. 13 uses this quirk mostly for removing wreckage caused by disasters during rescue missions. Because all absorbed material gets reduced to atoms, there's no need to dispose of it any further, which speeds up the cleanup process. 13, being a hero specialized in rescue missions, is not very experienced in using Black Hole for battle purposes despite her quirk's strength. She prefers to use Black Hole solely as a method to stop enemies from slipping away, turning it off immediately if the target gets too close to the disintegration range, even if this ends up being disadvantageous for her. Due to that restriction, Black Hole is unsuitable for close combat. 13's quirk factor lies within her fingers, and after losing her left arm to Tomura Shigaraki's decay, Black Hole's activation is now limited to her right hand. Black Whip. Black Whip was the quirk used by Daigoro Banjo, later inherited by Izuku Midoriya. Black Whip allows the user the ability to produce black energy tendrils from any part of their body and command them at will. This quirk appears to be powered by emotions, primarily anger, meaning the greater the anger, the stronger the quirk becomes. This was demonstrated during the Paranormal Liberation War, when Izuku uses the anger and hatred he felt towards Tomura Shigaraki to increase Black Whip's power, allowing him to restrain Tomura while he was unsuccessful before. Daigoro describes Black Whip as a top-grade quirk. It appears to be useful for capturing enemies and increasing one's own mobility by grabbing onto objects. By the time Izuku acquires this ability, Black Whip has evolved within the core of One For All, drastically increasing its potential power and scope. When Izuku focuses on capturing a target and gets angry, the ability explodes out of his arm. The black tendrils are much larger and powerful enough to cause Izuku great pain and force him into submission. Later, when he used the quirk again to grab onto some pipes that were going to hit him, he found he could only use the quirk for a brief moment of time because of how powerful it had become due to One For All. He was left with a numbing pain after using it. After the joint training battle, Izuku gained the ability to use a less powerful and smaller version of Black Whip without any physical strain, as long as he stays calm while using it and doesn't go over 5% of his power. By the wane of the Hero Work Studies Round 2, in Izuku's fight with Ending, he was able to use Black Whip to save cars from falling. Izuku's mastery over Black Whip drastically improves again during his search for All For One and the League of Villains. He now continuously sprouts up to 6 tendrils from his back, which can now act as an extra limb for Izuku, needing no more guidance from his arms to maneuver them around. As Daigoro described it, if not fully in control of their emotions, the user runs the risk of losing control of Black Whip. Blade Tooth. Blade Tooth is the quirk possessed by Moonfish. Blade Tooth grants Moonfish the ability to enlarge and reshape his teeth into sharp blades. The blades can vary in both size and shape. The user can manipulate the length and direction of the teeth at will. They're powerful enough to break through Shoto Todoroki's ice, but can be shattered with enough force. Moonfish uses his quirk to increase his mobility and attack his targets from a distance. The villain barrages his opponents with torrents of teeth attacks to overwhelm them and break down their defenses. The blades are fast and can stretch to incredible lengths, making them perfect for Moonfish to skewer his foes from afar. Moonfish can suspend himself in the air and even move by manipulating his teeth. Blast. Blast is the quirk used by Sensoji. Blast allows him to shoot continuous blasts of energy from the palms of his hands at a very rapid rate. These blasts are powerful, with a ton of stopping power, so it's considered an ideal quirk to shut down most villains. Although powerful, Blast generates flashes that are bright enough to cause the user to be temporarily blinded by his own power, causing him to have problems with accurate aiming, making these shots unpredictable in range. To counteract this inconvenience, Sensoji only needs to wear shades to protect his eyes, thus preventing Blast from blinding him and giving him a major accuracy boost. Blazing Hair. Blazing Hair is the quirk used by Moe Kamiji. Blazing Hair allows the user to freely control the flames on their head. Moe primarily utilizes it by grabbing chunks from her hair, which she can throw like fireballs. She can also control the flames to fly, although this has not been demonstrated yet. Blood control. Blood control is the quirk used by Vlad King. Blood control allows the user to manipulate their own blood after it has left their body. Once the blood is out in the open air, the user can freely control its flow and movements, as well as harden it to immobilize foes. Blood control also appears to allow the user to go unaffected by levels of blood loss that would normally be fatal. Vlad King uses special gloves which are connected to tubes attached to various parts of his body to release large amounts of blood quickly. He can also reabsorb his blood back through his gloves. Blood Curdle. Blood Curdle is the quirk used by Chizome Akaguro. Blood Curdle allows Chizome to temporarily paralyze an opponent by ingesting samples of their blood. Chizome only requires his tongue to make contact with a small amount of a person's blood, regardless of where and how it's found. Once the user gains access to his target's blood, they can activate Blood Curdle and immobilize their target for a limited period of time, leaving them vulnerable to a finishing move. Regardless, the maximum amount of time anyone can stay paralyzed is for 8 minutes. Body Morph. Body Morph is the quirk used by Steel Bulwark. Steel Bulwark's quirk grants him 2 extra arms in addition to providing him with great physical strength. Bombify. Bombify is one of the quirks possessed by number 6. This quirk allows the user to manipulate parts of their body to grow bombs of various sizes out of them. It appears to be some semblance of an artificial quirk, created due to the bomber cells that reside within its user, number 6. Boomerang. Boomerang is the quirk used by Itejiro Toteki. Boomerang seemingly allows the user to control the trajectory of thrown objects. This can allow the objects to hone in on targets. The projectiles are not unstoppable though, even if they are hard as concrete. A viscous liquid like Mina's acid quirk can easily interrupt their path. Brainwashing. Brainwashing is the quirk used by Hitoshi Shinzo. Brainwashing allows Hitoshi to put his target in a state where they are forced to obey all of his commands. In order to activate his power, he needs his target to verbally respond to something he says. Victims feel dazed while under the effects, like their brain is full of fog, but will remain largely aware of their current state of being brainwashed. The victim's body will move on its own in accordance with Hitoshi's commands. Furthermore, without receiving any orders from Hitoshi, the victim will remain completely motionless, giving him the opportunity to attack or restrain them. Brainwashing can also be used for support. By brainwashing people, Hitoshi can force them to help him. When Shoto Todoroki froze the trail during the obstacle race, he brainwashed a group of other students to carry him over the ice. He also took control of 3 hero students so they would be his team for the cavalry battle. Hitoshi is unable to have his brainwashed targets perform orders that require complex brain activity, such as talking or thinking, meaning he cannot make them write down information from their memory. He must keep his commands simple for them to be followed. The brainwashing effect requires the target to answer to take place. Therefore, as long as the target remains silent, this quirk will not have any effect on them. It is also possible to escape the mind control if the victim is hit by a sufficiently strong physical jolt or through a similar amount of pain. Brainwashing is implied not to work on non-living entities, which can justify Hitoshi's failure in the UA entrance exam, as the targets in the practical portion were robots. Bristle. Bristle is the quirk used by Tsuyoshi. Bristle allows Tsuyoshi to make his hair super hard. He has not been seen using it under any circumstances, so more characteristics of the quirk are unknown. Brown Bear. Brown Bear is the quirk used by Bearhead. This quirk gives the user the attributes and abilities of a bear, including enhanced strength, great durability, acute senses, and large, sharp claws. Bubble. Bubble is the quirk used by Karuko Owada. Bubble allows Karuko to make bubbles filled with an aroma that she has smelled at least once before. Her main usage of this quirk is to create quick distractions that can temporarily blind foes as she restrains them. She can make both sweet-smelling bubbles and foul-smelling ones. Bullhead. Bullhead is the quirk used by Minotaurus. Bullhead gives the user a pair of bull-like horns on their head. Bullet Laser. Bullet Laser was the unnamed quirk possessed by Nine, who stole it from an unknown hero. Bullet Laser allowed Nine to fire purple-colored lasers from his fingernails, which he could fire both as direct blasts, as well as curve-set beams straight from his fingers. These lasers were strong enough to easily pierce through flesh, as well as destroy an entire house and large boulders. They could also explode upon contact. Bundodo. Bundodo is the quirk used by Mario Kogutsu. The quirk's proper function isn't entirely known due to it only being shown under the effects of Trigger. Mario's quirk seemingly grows him to gigantic proportions, similar to gigantification, while also turning his skin black, most likely due to Trigger, and growing an extra set of arms. Did you enjoy our video? Be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.